Hi, folks. This is Gary Exelby, Operations Manager for KLUH Life Radio 90.3 FM. Today we are pleased to bring you a two-part interview with Pastor Chris Shelton of Rock Ministries in Piggott, Arkansas. Part 1 will feature discussion of Shelton's book, It's Okay, You're With My Father, regarding his experience as a child abuse investigator before he entered the ministry. Chris, tell me a little bit about your book.
Well, Gary, I really appreciate the opportunity. The book was written as a response to spending 10 years in working in child protective services. And, I realized that the state can help, but only God can heal, and I felt God calling me to go to ministry school. And we formed a ministry that would reach out to folks that weren't typically being reached out to, or that wouldn't typically feel comfortable walking into a traditional church. Mm-hmm. And that was great. But, then I felt God calling me to write this book, It's Okay With My Father, a child abuse investigator's call to the church. And the book is actually a series of cases that I was involved in. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't identify anybody, and I don't get into graphic detail.
Right.
But I tell enough to where I can mention that there's such a need for the church, and it's areas where the church can get involved. And I think it's areas where they don't really realize what's going on. But here, this is the Bible Belt of America, the heartland of America, and I was working 100 cases a year for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so There's an incredible opportunity for the church to reach out. The book is just 104 pages. Mm-hmm. It does have a chapter in it on what to do if you've been abused. It has a chapter in it on what to look for. Mm-hmm. And it's a great witnessing tool because it also has the gospel message in it.
Okay. And we hear a lot of stuff that is being called by this, that, or the other advocacy group or individual, or folks with maybe a political agenda. They're calling this, that, or the other thing child abuse. And on the other hand, we hear some other folks in the same categories claiming that this, that, or the other thing is not child abuse. Could you give us a kind of a rundown as to what, as far as the state is? Now, you worked in Arkansas, is that correct?
Yes, I did, for 10 years.
Okay, if you could give us a rundown as to what constituted child abuse under the law down there. I imagine it's probably going to be kind of similar up here in Missouri.
There's subtle changes state to state, but I would imagine they're pretty consistent across the board. Sometimes people say the state says you can't, or the government says you can't discipline children, and that's not true. You can and you should. Mm-hmm. But there's a difference between discipline, which is done to correct, and it's done with love, and then abusing. And abusing is typically somebody has lost their temper, and, as opposed to swat on the rear end, we've had cases where somebody took the end of a cane pole, and I remember that particular case, the individual was throwing a fit. He was actually charged. He said there wasn't a lick that wasn't on her rear end. I said, yeah, but everywhere there was a lick, she had to have stitches.
Ouch.
And it was somebody that had lost her temper, lost control, and that's something we need to be careful of. I have been involved in a couple of child death cases. One was where a father had lost his temper and had shaken a baby too hard. Mm-hmm. We had a particular case where, I had to take a child to the emergency room and when the doctor saw the child, he said, my God, it's like somebody beat this kid up like you'd beat up a man. Mm. Wow. And this particular father had made the comment, he said, well, that's how my dad taught me to be a man. And I have no doubt that that's probably what he had experienced growing up. But, at some point we've got to break the cycles. And of course, anything sexual is absolutely criminal abuse.
Okay. Now, what other kinds of abuse are there? Obviously, if the kid has physical damage, to include but not limited to, say, from a rape, to include but not limited to being hit with a cane pole, like you said, what other things constitute abuse as far as the law is concerned? We hear a lot about emotional, psychological abuse, these sorts of things. How does the law look at that?
Well, there's actually abuse, and then there's neglect, and then there's situations that are caused by poverty, and that's not abuse or neglect. That's a situation that they can't help, and that's an incredible opportunity for the church to come in and help people, and not by just putting money at a problem, because too often churches are really strained by people coming at them for money. But I actually talk in the book about something called a Helps Urgent Response Team, a HURT team. And that's an opportunity for a church to go out to a family and actually minister to them, maybe minister to the father, maybe minister to the mother, maybe minister to the teens, maybe help get them back on track where they can, sometimes it just takes a little help to get them back on track. And these people aren't horrible people. They've come from horrible backgrounds. and they're desperate for somebody to love them and reach out to them. Now, they're going to be suspicious of it or cautious of it because they've been, kicked a whole lot of times.
Right.
But, with somebody with the right attitude, they can come in and make a huge difference, and sometimes, make the difference. Mm-hmm. I've spent a lot of time looking at families, and sometimes I see where families came from difficult backgrounds and they stay stuck in the system, and I see where somebody came from a difficult background and they go on to make a difference and achieve. And I've asked myself, what's the difference? And then the difference is at some point, somebody's made a difference in their life. And, the thing is, it might have even been such a small difference that the person that made the difference didn't even realize they did it.
Wow. Just wow. How can people get involved in such a ministry?
They can go to our website. It's call2honor.org. And they can take an initial check right there if they want to be involved in supporting us. There's a huge, desperate need for foster parents, and this is an incredible opportunity for the church. Sadly, the government's trying to push the church out of everything, and really, the church is the one that has the answers and can make a difference if we're doing what we really can do. And what I would recommend, I love the thought, one church, one foster home. If every pastor out there, prayerfully considered speaking to his congregation about, hey, is God calling somebody here to be a foster parent? And it's something you need to do prayerfully. I mean, you need to do it as prayerfully as if you felt God was calling you to go to Africa or something.
Wow.
But I can't imagine that God wouldn't be doing it. And then if the church could get around and support that person, and I'm not talking financially, I'm just talking with emotional support and encouragement. And then if these people see in the system, they're in the system there, if they can see where people out there trying to do the job need help, they can go to their state legislature, and not in a negative way. We should always go to our state legislature in a positive way and show them support. But we can get them support they need to do to make a difference out there. But the cool thing about a Christian foster home is, a lot of people are always saying, well, is God calling me to a ministry? Well, this is a ministry that you don't make a lot of money at, but it pays for itself because the state will pay you to care for the child. And of course, that's not, why you do it. I mean, what they pay you is barely enough to care for the child, and that's what they want you to do. But with a Christian foster home, you can not only make a difference with that child who's probably never seen a real loving, environment the way it should be or had an exposure to a church. Some of these kids, to them, Jesus Christ, he's right there with the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. But if they can have a real experience in a real family, it can make a huge difference. But the thing is, with a Christian family, they can reach out to the parents of these kids because, again, in a lot of cases, they're not horrible people. They've come from horrible backgrounds, and they're just as desperate to have somebody reach out to them and make a difference. You can be a part of restoring a family.
Okay.
Now, there's cases where somebody should never have access to a child again.
Right.
I talk in my book about a case where a stepfather traded his 11-year-old daughter for drugs.
Jeez.
You don't try to restore that. That guy's in jail, and that's where he needs to be.
Wow, yeah, that's a good point. I've done a little bit of research on the subject of child abuse, but only in a different context about, people that end up suffering from various addictions. And is it correct to say that, for example, somebody like this guy you just talked about that's in the pokey now for renting out his daughter, is it probably safe to say that he himself was abused in some way or another, based on the idea that hurting people hurt people?
I never had a situation where we didn't have somebody that was abusive that had not been abused. But, it's like I tell people, and I never want to be seen as soft on crime.
Right.
If you do the crime, you need to do the time.
Right.
But on the other hand, we have to look at breaking cycles. We have to look at restoration. And I don't want to see anybody go to hell.
Right.
My Lord put himself on a cross so that nobody would have to go to hell. And I don't wish anybody to go to hell. Now, again, if you do the crime, you need to do the time. But, let's send them to jail with the Bible and let's get them saved while they're doing their time.
Right.
And try to restore that life. But typically, I found that people had been abused and typically had porn addictions. Typically, I've seen where people that had been abused end up going on. We know about half statistically go on to be abusers. Half say, look, it happened to me, it's never going to happen to anybody else, and then the other half go on to be abusive. And we also know people that have gone through that a lot of times will seek to self-medicate with situations without really, really good counseling.
Right.
and they'll get addicted to drugs.
Yeah,
so again, there really needs to be an intervention and for us to be making a difference. But we need to be doing it in a way that's, very loving.
Okay. All righty. How can people find out more about any of these subjects that we've talked about?
Well, a good first step is
okay, and how would they do that? And the name of the book, of course,
is available. Yeah, it's called "It's Okay You're With My Father," a child abuse investigator's called it to the church. It's a very Christian-oriented book. It's available through most major bookstores. You probably have to order it through the bookstore, but it's available. It's also available online through most avenues online. It's also available on Nook and Kindle. If they go to our website. Again, it's calltohonor.org, and go to About Us and look under the book. There's links to Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and I think the Christian Broadcasting Network's offering it through their site now, too.
Okay, good.
But then, you can see other links through there. I mean, you can see there's books that have been put out by children that have been abused, and this is from an aspect of somebody that was an investigator and a Christian investigator.
Right.
I was hugely honored. I mean, I've heard from foster parents where teenage girls that have been abused have heard about the book and have went out to get the book with their own money, and it's gotten back that they said, it was really nice for them to read that and see that there was somebody in the system that really did understand what they were going through, and that really touches my heart.
Okay, all righty. And is there anything to add?
Well, just that, again, there's a huge need for foster parents. There is Christian groups that are forming groups to work outside the system, and that's a really great thing. It's really a great thing if people can work within the system, too. And that's real difficult, but the reason I mention it is, as Christians, if we're inside the system, we have a chance to kind of to change the system for the better. So you can contact your local Department of Human Services, either in person or online, and you can find out what's involved in being a foster parent. Again, it's not easy to be one. It shouldn't be. But again, it's an incredible ministry opportunity if somebody feels called to do it. And I think sometimes people think, I don't feel equipped to do it, and my answer to that would be praise God, because God works with people that He can show that He's the one that's doing it. So, if you trust God and you have a real heart, you can make a huge difference, because that's the biggest thing is these kids just really need to see that the genuine love of God in their life.
Okay, folks, we have been talking with Pastor Chris Shelton of Reach Out Christ Kingdom Ministries in Piggott, also author of the book, It's Okay You're With My Father. And for FYI, I'm Gary Exelby on Life Radio 90.3 FM.
Thanks for joining us for FYI, Public Information Program on Life Radio 90.3.